Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. Can I also welcome the Chief Executive and the leader? Thank you for attending this evening. Obviously, we've got an interesting item on our agenda this evening to discuss. And also welcome to Carl, who's from the Regional Internal Audit Service, who's observing this evening, and welcome and hope you enjoy. Before we start, can I please remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded and the recording archive for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, please raise your hand if in the chamber or use the raise hand function if you're joining remotely. I will indicate when it is your turn to speak, so please then select the request to speak button, which will allow you to come on screen. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function. The chat function should only be used to highlight any technical issues or to get the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer. So thank you for all that. And then moving straight into the agenda and item 1, please can I have any apologies for absence?
No apologies, Chair. Everyone is present. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the reconvened meeting held on the 6th of January 2025. The minutes contained at pages 1 to 16 and are for correctness only. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Nigel. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's carried. Item 3 then, to receive any declaration of interest and the nature of such interest under the Members' Code of Conduct. Are there any? I'll just have it mentioned in the minutes that under the peer assessment, Ellis Cooper, who was one of the inspectors, was my deputy in Merthyr. So whilst I've got any influence or anything like that over him, I just wanted noted that that obviously I was in Merthyr previously. Item 4 then on the agenda is the long-awaited Cardiff Region City deal, the issue around the accounts 23-24. Over to you, Matt, first.
Yeah, thank you. So just a brief intro to this item. Thanks for your introduction, Chair. You'll recall that we've had some challenges over the last couple of years with the council's statutory accounts because of the impact of the timing of both the draft and the audited accounts for the Cardiff Capital Region. So you've asked me to invite this Section 151 officer along, which I've done. So Liam Hill is going to come along. Well, he's going to take you through a set of slides in a moment, setting out some of the complexities that they have as a region in their accounting, and then a bit more update on where they are with the 23-4 accounts and what the prospects are for a more timely set of accounts for 2024-25. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Can I just say that if possible for the next meeting, we could have the slides just before the meeting so that obviously members can have a look through them, because it's a little bit difficult on the night trying to pick up issues which may arise or may not arise, but it would be useful if we could have them before next time, if that's possible. Liam, do you want the slides up, or did you want to just do an introduction first?
Yeah, so firstly, good evening, everyone, and thanks, Chair. And in terms of sharing the slides, absolutely, we can share them in better time in future. That's not a problem. I believe Matt is going to share the slides for us this evening. So is that okay, Matt? Thanks. Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Liam Hull. I'm the Strategic Director of Resources and the Section 151 Officer at Cardiff Capital Region. Thanks for having me this evening, shall I say. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Matt. So just in terms of what we're going to talk about this evening, so I'll cover a little bit about the overview and the background of the City deal, and then talk through some of the delays to the previous financial statements and some of the reasons behind that, but also give an update on the current status of the 23-24 accounts and what the future year timetable and the commitment to get more on track looks like. Next slide, please, Matt. So just a recap in terms of City Deal. So City Deal is a partnership of the 10 South East Wales local authorities, and it was a £1.2 billion city deal that was created back in 2017 to increase GVA jobs and leverage right across the Cardiff Capital region. Since the 1st of April 2024, we've integrated the City Deal into one legal governance model alongside our corporate joint committee statutory responsibilities. And that's why we are now known as Cardiff Capital Region rather than the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, which isn't quite as catchy. And as one of the 10 local authorities, you are shareholders in all of our major investments and our equity investments as well. And as a result of that, you consolidate the relevant proportion of our City Deal accounts into your own financial statements. And as Matt pointed out, there have been some challenges over previous years in that regard in terms of the timing of when our final accounts are produced. And then just to touch on the fundamentals of what we're trying to do at Cardiff Capital Region, that evergreen approach to investment, meaning that return funds can be recycled back into the organisation and then have a further impact right across the region. Next slide, please, Matt. So in terms of our accounting arrangements and the need for consolidation, so we produce our own single entity accounts in terms of City Deal, but we do have subsidiaries that subsidiary companies that feed in then to our accounts. So as well as you consolidating our accounts in, we're also consolidating our subsidiary companies to form a group accounts. And it's a fairly complex group structure. And again, I'll come on to some of the challenges that has produced in previous years. Next slide, Matt. So this next slide, then, I wasn't intended to talk through this in any great detail, but you can see there that there have been challenges both in terms of when the accounts or when the draft accounts are submitted to Audit Wales, but also some significant periods between the draft accounts being submitted and the final accounts being signed off. And that's been the case over the last few years, and it's something that has continued this year. But it's something that I'm committed to getting back on track, as I said, for future years, which I'll talk through in a bit more detail later. Next slide, please, Matt. So in terms of the challenges for why there have been some of these delays in the past, and it's 3 C's really, as I've referenced them here on the slide. The first one is capacity. So under the previous accountable body arrangements, so that's pre the 1st of April this year, there was very limited capacity to be able to produce the financial statements. So one, that had an impact in terms of the time of putting them together, but also moving on to the second area then of challenge and peer review. This limited capacity meant that the opportunity for others to challenge and sort of peer review that work to really create a high quality set of draft accounts before submission to Audit Wales was also limited. And then finally, in terms of complexity, many of the transactions that are going through the City Deal accounts, so we talked about a complex group structure, equity investments, that sort of thing, they are fairly novel in the public sector, and they present ongoing technical challenges that need to be worked through. But significantly, when the first time that specific technical challenges were presented, they took a long time to sort of untangle and figure out how we were going to present those within the accounts. So they are the 3 key reasons why there's been some delays to the accounts. And if you move on to the next slide, please, Matt, I'll just talk through the impact that has had on the audit. So firstly, in terms of capacity, having almost one single point of failure can lead to a bottleneck when dealing with audit queries as well. So that has led to a protracted audit period. There have been capacity constraints within Audit Wales as well, which has impacted when the majority of the fieldwork could be delivered. And this almost becomes a bit of a vicious circle where if you miss the initial deadline, then the audit window available to you for the fieldwork to be delivered is pushed back because of capacity constraints within Audit Wales, which means then until that year is finalised, you can't move forward, and it just, as I said, it becomes a vicious circle. And then again, that's something I touched on in terms of the challenge in peer review. That has impacted the quality of the draft accounts that we've submitted to Audit Wales in the past, and that's led to additional adjustment through the audit process. But finally, and most importantly, is that complexity and those complex transactions naturally increase the audit risks, and that leads to a higher level of sampling by auditors and more field work as a result as well, which naturally would extend the audit period. So it's been a challenging time over the last few years to produce the accounts. But if we focus on the 23-24 accounts, Matt, if you just move on to the next slide, please. So it'll be the first time, the 23-24 accounts will be the first time that the statement of accounts have been produced since we've established CCR as a public body, even though it relates to the period pre being established. It's the accounts have been produced with more capacity and capability added to the team as we've naturally grown as a public body. So myself, I joined in July of this year as the Section 151 officer, but we've also strengthened and added more resilience to the finance team that sits within CCR as well. There is some additional complexity this year as well. So we are using a new financial system for 24-25 onwards, which is supported by RCT Council through an SLA, whereas under the previous accountable body method, we were on Cardiff Council's financial system. So we're using a new system, yet still closing down a different system for 23-24. So that's added some time pressures and some challenges to us. That being said, the draft accounts have been submitted to Audit Wales, and something when I came in, I immediately instigated was a robust internal quality assurance check and an analytical review before submission. So I'm confident that the quality of the draft accounts has improved this year. We are in the middle of the audit window at the moment, so Audit Wales are conducting their fieldwork throughout January and February. We're on track for those accounts to be signed off before the end of the financial year. And then given that capacity and capability that's been added into the team since we've become a public body, there is a commitment from us that for 2024-25 onwards, there is no reason why our accounts shouldn't be produced in line with the local authority timetable, which for next year is the draft accounts being signed off by the end of June, and then final sign off by the end of October as well. So we should have seen the last of the challenges that you've faced due to the delays our side. And certainly if we were in the same position next year, I would rightly come back and expect to be hauled over the coals. So there is a strong commitment from us to be able to get back on track this year. So that's the last of the slides from me. Thanks again, everyone, for having me, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Liam, for that. Obviously, it gives us a snapshot in regards to where we are in the accounting process. And as you understand, the previous accounts are sort of held up the 10 constituent authority accounts in some respects. And I'm pleased to hear that you've got some hope that Audit Wales will actually deliver what you've set out there, because I know in previous years they've given local authority accounts priority over the Cardiff Capital Region, and all I hope is that this year they actually do them in line with in line with the local authority accounts, because otherwise we're going to be in the same position again. Is that if they leave you to last, we're going to be there wanting and waiting for yours to be satisfied. Anyway, before I go on, any questions? Councillor Goodjohn?
Sure. I wanted to ask first off about what you've learnt from previous quangos that have existed in Wales. We've had regional cooperation between councils before, and we've had bodies which are very similar in nature in the public realm. I'm quite interested as to your thoughts as to capacity issues within these organisations when it comes to its own governance. If there have been any lessons learnt from that could have been implemented quicker when it comes to statutory requirements like the preparation of accounts, as a starting question.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. So I suppose one of the things that I think the team have learned before my arrival, but it's something I support, is that we've got 10 local authorities who've got very strong governance arrangements in place and mechanisms for corporate support. And we've utilised that through a number of SLAs with Rhondda and Taff Council for, as I touched on earlier, access to their financial system, internal audit, a number of other SLAs around corporate support mainly. And I think that sort of strengthens us and puts us on a good footing in terms of capacity.
Yeah, thanks for that. I suppose there has been quite a break between the historical comparisons that I'm invoking here, but my kind of line of thought process is you must understand that there is quite a gap between where we are, where the general public is, and yourselves as a public body, which is in the nature of a body such as the City Deal. You mentioned how it's been difficult to get peer review and peer challenge on the accounts, which led to a lot of adjustments. I wonder if how you plan on accounting for that in the future and adjusting your practices in order to get more peer review, get that kind of assurance that you're doing things correctly outside of the simple statutory requirements through Audit Wales.
Thank you, Councillor. So just in terms of the peer review question, which I think is a good one, but when I refer to peer review in my slides, I was referring to sort of internal peer review within an organisation to scrutinise the draft accounts before submission. I think it would be challenging from a timescale point of view to bring in any external peer review in that regard on the accounts per se. But that being said, sort of as the corporate joint committees across Wales become more established, there is already a close working relationship between them, but we need to develop that further and utilise that opportunity for peer review amongst the corporate joint committees, I would say.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And to finish off, I think there has been a long working relationship between councils in Wales through the WLGA, which has spoken as a joint voice when it comes to the local public sector in Wales. And that has allowed for a lot of joint practice to come through. I'm thinking of examples like the Welsh Treasurers Committee, whose name I cannot fully recall right now, but that's a fantastic body which allows Section 151 officers to work together and share good practice in the public sector and gain knowledge about good practice in England as well and in Scotland. So I wonder what kind of governance setups you're having when it comes to the preparation of accounts, working with local councils and the other corporate joint committees in order to make sure that good practice is shared as quickly as possible in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. So I meet quarterly with the 10 Section 151 officers within the region to discuss Cardiff Capital Region. The accounts features pretty high on that agenda. As well as that, my finance business partner is involved in the Chief Accountants Working Group, which is across Wales. So we have very close links to local authorities, not just within the 10, but also further afield within the rest of Wales as well as keeping up to date with sort of networking events and good practice events that I know Audit Wales share a lot of guidance and updates on those as well. So there are a number of mechanisms that we keep up to date with developments.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Hooper?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Liam. And I'm sorry I'm not in the room tonight because but you wouldn't want my cold. Because this is something I've been asking for a number of years, that the City Deal come and talk through their accounts. And Liam, I appreciate you're new and some of these questions I don't think you'll be able to answer, but I wouldn't mind if you give them a go. The City Deal, as you started out, is approaching its halfway point. I find it frankly incredulous that we are talking about these sort of issues with accounting basics, and we're almost halfway through the City Deal. We've got experienced people who've been set to run the City Deal, and I just don't get it. You talk about complexity. We had complexity raised as a one-word response previously when we've challenged it separately, but perhaps we need to dig into that a little bit more, because just saying something's complex, therefore it's hard to do, isn't good enough when we're here to scrutinise you, because we're doing this on behalf of the people of the Vale of Glamorgan, looking to make sure that what goes into our accounts is scrutinised and fair. So I'd really like a bit more detail on that. By the looks of the structure, you're not looking at a structure that's out of place in any corporate world whatsoever. Most people have got group companies that have hundreds of different accounts. So with 3 different accounts going into one parent entity doesn't seem to be too difficult. I'm really concerned to hear that you're changing, given what I've just said, that you decided to change an accounting system at this point as well. That seems like a really tricky thing to do if you haven't got the basics sorted. So I'd appreciate some more feedback on that. I suppose the last point, and again, this may not be something you'll be able to respond to, but this Cardiff City region has been resourced well, from my perspective, from whence it started. And I just do not understand whether or not why the central support functions, accountancy in particular, has led to a point in, this is your words, that there's been a single point of failure. That just seems to be, I'll use the word again, incredulous, that we're in a position that we have a single point of failure by something that was allegedly supposed to deliver all this GVA benefit to our community. So I'd welcome your views on those points in the first instance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So if I take those in the order that you asked them, then in terms of the complexity, I set out in terms of some of those equity investments that I talked about in the subsidiary companies as well. I do take your point that, in the corporate world, having subsidiary companies feeding into a group structure is pretty par for the course. We do have to balance the corporate and commercial way that those companies are set up, feeding into what are ultimately local authority accounts. So there's different accounting standards and different accounting practices that sit within there. So that's where some of the complexity lies, as well as it is fairly novel within the public sector. So the audit process tends to take longer because they are transactions that maybe Audit Wales are not necessarily used to dealing with within the public sector as well. So in terms of the finance system then, so under the old model of an accountable body that sat within Cardiff Council, we were ultimately a programme sat within the council itself, whereas through the lift and shift arrangements to establish a new public body from the 1st of April this year, that model wasn't possible, and RCT volunteered to support us through a number of SLAs. So that was what we felt was the best option available to us. It has presented us with some challenges, as I discussed, but we are confident that those challenges are behind us now, and we can move forward in line with the timescales that I referred to in the slides. Apologies, Councillor. Could you just remind me of the third? There was a third question you asked, but I didn't take a note of it. Sorry.
It's about resources, Liam. The city deal has been well resourced since it started, and I do not understand how we've got to a position where, as you described, there was a single point of failure. The chair referenced at the start that we want Audit Wales to be able to deal with your submissions on a more timely basis. But there seems to be problems, significant problems within the organisation. And I'm just going to reiterate the point I made at the very start. We're halfway through, almost, the city deal process from when it started in 2017. So, these sound like teething problems in year 8, and I don't get it. Were the sufficient resources applied to accountancy, or were we too busy going off to France and places like that to be able to sell the region?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Councillor, and apologies for not noting that one down. I suppose this is the first year that we've been established as an organisation, and I can only come in and concern myself and comment really on, do I feel that we've got adequate resources now to take things forward in the right way? And the answer to that is yes. Previously, as I said, we were a programme that sat within Cardiff Council, and while there is resource allocated to CCR through local authority contributions, that needs to go across a range of different functions as well. And the decision taken around the size and scale of the finance team at that point, notwithstanding the support that was provided from Cardiff Council at the time as well, what was deemed to be adequate in the circumstances. But certainly going forward, now that we are our own public body, that needed to be beefed up and further added to. And I'm confident that we've got the capacity and the capability within the team now to be able to deliver.
Councillor Wood.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Chair. So a little bit directly to reference with what was just said. I mean, we have a company here that is administering 1.2 billion quid, if I'm correct, having looked at it. And I'd like to say I find it really quite concerning that it's 8 years in and people have just realised that they need to beef up their audit function. This is not an inconsiderable, if it was a standalone business, I know it's a public sector body, but I'm quite concerned, and I'd just like to ask, whilst he says he's very confident that he will be able to carry out the audits, when we're using services provided by other councils, and it's very reassuring to hear that should it fail next year, we'll be hauled across the coals, but this is the first or second proper set of accounts that we're going to see in 8 years for a £1.2 billion project with 3 companies. And I'm not, I've worked for some companies overseas and all over the place. It doesn't take 8 years to produce a set of accounts. So whilst I'm reassured, I'd like to ask, does he personally feel that he has enough resource to be able to pull this off going forward to achieve the aims of the entire CCR?
Thank you, Councillor Wood. So firstly, while we are 8 years into City Deal funding. This is the first year that we've been a standalone public entity. And then in terms of previous years' accounts, while there have been delays to those accounts have been produced. They've been audited by Audit Wales, and they've all received an unqualified audit opinion. So this isn't a case that the accounts are not being produced. They are being produced, albeit there are delays to those accounts, which going forward isn't acceptable. So to answer your second question, yes, to be able to deliver the accounts within the timescale set out, I am personally confident that we've now got the resource in place to be able to deliver that for a public body. But I just wanted to reiterate, this isn't. They are not missing accounts here. There have been delays to accounts in previous years, but they have been produced. They've been audited by Audit Wales, and they've all received unqualified audit opinions.
Okay, thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in on one point that you raised earlier, actually, which was the timing of the support given by Audit Wales. And we can't lose sight, and Liam has touched on it already, that Cardiff Capital Region City Deal is now a member of the local government family through the Corporate Joint Committee. And until the 1st of April last year, that wasn't the case. So if you look at local government in Wales, 22 unitary authorities, you've also got the Corporate Joint Committees now, which has the same status in law. So they need Section 151 officer. Liam is here tonight. So I would expect Audit Wales to have that in their minds when they look at timetabling of audit work for us, for any other council and for the CJCs, because we have the same status.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rob. And I think we just need to remind ourselves as well that local authorities were delayed last year because of capacity issues within Audit Wales. So timescales were pushed off a little as well. So, that's a very relevant point. So thanks for that, Rob. Liam, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, sorry, just on that point, Chair, if I may. So we've been having those discussions with Audit Wales, and there's a commitment from them. They, as much as us, want to get those timescales back in line with local authorities, and they've committed to providing that resource in line with the same way that they do to local authorities for 24-25 forwards.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Hooper, is that a legacy hand, or have you got some other questions?
No, Chair, it was a follow-up from my previous.
My apologies. I should have let you follow up. My apologies.
And Councillor Wood has said quite a lot, which I just want to agree with as well. He seemed like he was, I feel like we're scratching our head. But I want to make a point of scrutiny in this committee. And Chair, you'll know this because you've been the chair of this committee since we started. And it was probably at the first committee meeting that I asked for these accounts to come to the committee, and we could have unearthed this concern, or at least been aware of it 2.5 years ago. But now we're waiting until now. And I've got a specific concern that again, I'm not sure Liam will be able to arrest, but be able to deal with. Matt may want to deal with. Why has it taken this long for us to get this report to this committee? What has stopped it from doing it? Because it seems like these issues, people were aware of them. There's some clarity over them now by the sound of things, although perhaps we'll come back to the complexity issue at the moment. But this committee asked on behalf of the residents of the Vale of Glamorgan and was refused time and time and time again. Whether that refusal was direct or indirect, it doesn't matter. It was consistently brought up. And now we've got here a situation where clearly they, frankly, and I mean this in the, I'm trying to be as professional as I can be, but they didn't seem to know what they were doing for 8 years. They made investments without knowing how to account for them. They made investments prior to the city deal even starting in the Foundry deal without knowing how to account for them. And now we're dealing with a legacy of that. I wish Liam all the very best to sort these things out. But why is it just now we're finding out about this? Thank you.
So thank you, Councillor. Just in terms of why we haven't come previously, apologies, I can't answer that question, but I can just, give you a firm commitment that I will continue to come to the committee if required. But yeah, I can't answer for previously, unfortunately.
Thanks, Liam. Matt?
Thank you. I'm not sure it's quite 2.5 years in that I've not even been here 3 years myself. However, what we were striving to do was bring the accounts.
It is 2.5 years, Matt. Matt, it is 2.5 years. I've asked since the first committee meeting that I've been here. So I've consistently asked for this since I was elected, that the city deal come to this committee, and it didn't. So it's been the time since I've been elected, which turns 3 years come this May.
Mark, I think the position is now, obviously, and I think you've made the comment fairly strongly, and obviously you've asked numerous times, and but we're at where we're at. We're here now. We've got these accounts before us, and I think, as Liam's confirmed, you know, why we haven't seen the previously agreed statement accounts, all unqualified, which, you know, should have gone somewhere obviously within the authority itself, and actually should have come to us as part of the budget setting process. Clearly, there's been a change in the structure of the organisation from Cardiff Capital Region, or whatever it was called when we started it off, to the CJC. And we get your reassurance, Liam, in regards to moving forward. But Matt, did you want to clarify anything further?
I think some of the delay has been around us wanting to bring an audited set of accounts here and have a meaningful conversation about what the challenges have been and what the issues are and how that's going to be addressed going forward, and actually seeking clarity on what the committee wanted in front of it as well. And I had asked that question on a number of occasions in the past. Okay,
rather than get into any arguments here, I think obviously the position is, Liam, I think if we could get you here regularly, not necessarily every couple of months, but certainly every 12 months in regards to the statement of accounts, that would be useful. I've got just a couple of questions. Firstly, I think a lot of it's been raised before in regards to capacity. In the very early days, back in 2017, lots of local authorities took over the certain roles within the organisation. Some took accountancy, some took legal, some took X, Y, and Z. And obviously, as you quite rightly say, Cardiff took over the accountancy and financial role. And you know, if there were some issues surrounding the capacity within Cardiff, within the city of Cardiff, then obviously it should have been for the committee itself, the joint committee, to sort that out, because they were being paid an income for delivering that service. So, you know, whether we're saying that they didn't, you know, did we get value for money out of the contribution we made into Cardiff for their accounting services or not, is a question I think needs to be answered. The other things which come to light for me, and you've raised it, obviously we've now got the CJC. You've made comment quite regularly that RCT have offered up numerous service level agreements, certainly in regards to the financial system from Cardiff now into the new CJC. You also mentioned that RCT are also providing the internal audit service. The only question I've got is, did that actually go out to any kind of tendering, or did it go out to the other 9 authorities to say whether they wanted to provide the service? Because again, you know, RCT, and I only say it, RCT withdrew from the Regional Internal Audit Service to set up their own internal audit service. However, we got a Regional Internal Audit Service, and I'm not saying whether they could deliver it or not, but again, it would build some capacity. And I'm a little bit concerned, and maybe it's not for you to answer, but it would maybe for others to answer, you know, where was this all agreed that RCT would deliver X, Y, and Z? It'd be interesting to know what other SLAs are in place and whether any other local authority got the opportunity to provide that service, because again, that could produce some income for the local authority. I'm not saying people would be jumping at it, but it just seems a bit unfair that, you know, You mentioned it, that RCT has delivered lots of these things, but it'd be interesting to see how actually what process they went through, or what process CJC went through to tender for those services.
Thank you, Chair. So I wasn't around when those discussions were taking place, but it would have been discussed within the CJC, which would have been which would involve the 10 leaders across the region and the 10 chief executives as well, and a decision made at that point. But I can't comment on the details of those discussions, unfortunately, because I wasn't in post at the time.
Can I ask, seeing that you are in post now, that you find out exactly what process was adopted in regards to tendering for any of the work that CJC has put out? Because it's very important, local authorities within, certainly in the 10 South East Wales regions, are struggling for funding and finance. I'm a big supporter of collaboration, a huge supporter of collaboration. But, if we can strengthen some of the regional collaboratives we've got, it would be beneficial, rather than sometimes it just go into one authority. So if you could just actually find out what process was adopted, I'd be extremely grateful. And if you could let me have that information for this committee, or through Matt or wherever, that would be great.
Yeah. No problem at all, Chair. Just to clarify, we're just talking about for those service level agreements that we're talking about here.
Yeah,
yes?
well, whatever you put out now, seeing, unfortunately, you set the hair running now a bit, and whatever service level agreements you got, if RCT have got internal audit, your financial system, they may have other services, and I think as a collective, we certainly need to know about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can feed that back through to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Prothero.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I echo that sentiment for us to find out about what other service level agreements are in place. Liam, I just wanted to thank you for coming, and I just wanted to comment, as you can see, on the strength of feeling. As stakeholders, and certainly in this authority, as you can tell, we take scrutiny really seriously. And my question really is a curiosity. We are one of many in this stakeholders who have an interest in what you're doing. And I'm just curious, are others asking you the same questions? Is it just Bridgen that is asking you about the transparency and about your accounts and wanting to know what's happening?
Councillor Prothero, you mean the Vale, not Bridgend?
Yes, sorry, the Vale. I do apologise. Yeah, I meant the Vale. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. So this is the first Governance and Audit Committee meeting that I've attended of any of the 10 local authorities. There are other ways that we keep local authorities informed. I mentioned earlier around quarterly Section 151 officer meetings that I conduct. Each local authority has a representative on our own Governance and Audit Committee as well, where we provide them with information. So there are other mechanisms where we can keep local authorities up to speed, but this is the first meeting I've been invited along to.
Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, just a quick comment, really. Firstly, thank you, Liam, for coming, especially if it is your first Governance and Audit Committee meeting. I expect there'll be a few of them, I'm sure. I think for us, the big question is, have you learnt from the past? And it seems like you're attempting to do so. But the big question is, the very nature of a city deal like this is that the organisation is going to be difficult to scrutinise because it is indirect to the public. There is no direct mechanism for members of the public to have a say in what the city deal does. And I know that it's not of your fault or anything to do with any of the civil servants who work as part of the city deal, but because of that, the audit and governance arrangements need to be especially tight and especially precise in order to ensure public trust as an organisation and the trust of the local authorities, which are its stakeholders. So I think for me, when you come back, which I would deeply appreciate, I hope we haven't put you off too much, but I'd love to hear more about the fundamental steps that have been taken to shore up those processes in the future, rather than more broad and simple statements about how the service is now functioning properly, which I understand in the short term needed to happen. There needs to be internal arrangements to make sure that the very basics are being done right. But there is a bigger question here when it comes to making sure that the City Deal accounts and its finances are being held accountable to the public as well, beyond the account. So that means good communication from the City Deal to all sides of all local authorities, including individual members as well as the leaders and the Section 151 officers, and making sure that there is good communication between the Governance and Audit Committees and Finance Scrutiny Committees and the City Deal as to what is happening and when. I know it can happen because it's been shown in the past with projects of City Deal that it can perform good communication when it puts the effort in. So thank you very much for coming, and that's what I'd love to hear more about next time if you do come back.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. And I just pick on up on Councillor Goodjohn's point, and I think this is a point that you made previously, that perhaps we should be seeing. We are grateful for Liam coming here, but perhaps the Chief Executive should be here to be able to answer those questions rather than the Director. I think then they can talk because they've been there since the very start of the City Deal, so they should be able to talk about how their mistakes of the past won't be carried forward into the future.
Thanks, Councillor Hooper. Obviously, we are the Governance and Audit Committee seeking assurance here in regards to the account. Maybe some of these questions should be put in a different place than here, whether it should be in one of the scrutiny committees or wherever, because again, as you know, at the last committee meeting, I raised the issue about joint committee minutes, where they went in the council, whether they went to council, or do they go to the scrutiny committee, or where they actually go. And again, some of these issues could be picked up then, because I think as Councillor Goodjohn has said, and you, Councillor Hooper and Councillor Wood, you're looking after the residents of the Vale of Glamorgan Council here, and ensuring that that it is an open and transparent organisation. And I'm sure, and I'm only raising comment here now, I'm not going to allow any questions on this, but in the press last week, obviously there was a huge announcement that Cardiff Capital Region, or the City Joint Committee, has lost the case in regards to demolition costs in the sum of £10 million, plus that will be costs. So, I'm sure there's going to be some questions posed somewhere in regards to where that is going to be attributed. Is it going to be shared across the 10 local authorities, or is it going to be attributed to the council that let the contract, or whatever? But again, these are big issues, I think, which need to be asked and addressed. And I'm sure that, certainly the leader and the chief exec will raise these, fully at the relevant committees and discuss them at the relevant scrutiny committees. So I just raised that as a point because it was in the national press last week. I think we just need to keep a weathered eye on there, because my understanding is that the development was located in the Vale of Glamorgan. So apart from the benefits would bring, I think people tend to forget sometimes about the benefits it would bring, but they see the bad points, and I think that's something we need to address. Okay, there are no other comments. Then I think we just note the contents of, or not the contents of the report, note Liam's, oral report and his presentation. Thank him for coming along. Liam, thank you for coming along tonight. I'm sure you'll be invited again in due course. And if you could deal with the questions in regards to the service level agreements, I'd be greatly appreciated for the committee. We can advise the committee in regards to that regard. So someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Hello. Thank you, Councillor Wood. Anyone against? No, thank you. Thank you, Liam. You can stay if you wish, but if you want to go, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll take my leave. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Cheers, thanks. Item 5 then on the report is the Vale Glamorgan Council Panel Performance Assessment. Tom?
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. I'm going to take you through the first part of this report, and then Rob is going to come in a little bit later, if that's okay with you. So this is a reference from Cabinet on the 6th of February. In particular, it's recommendation 2 that your committee are considering this evening, Chair. So reviewing the report and appendices so that you can give both your consideration with any comments going back to Cabinet. Just wanted to draw members' attention to paragraph 5.4 and 5.8 of the report. I just thought it set some useful context. So it's the responsibility of the council, not the panel, to publish the panel's report, and as soon as reasonably practicable after receiving the report, we should take the report to the Governance and Audit Committee and publish the report. So that's what we're doing this evening. And in terms of your committee's role, paragraph 5.8 of the Cabinet report sets out that the Council must make a draft of its response to the panel performance assessment available to the Governance and Audit Committee, which must then review the draft response and make recommendations for changes to the response to the assessment. And then if the Council doesn't make any changes that you recommend, Chair, we need to set out the reasons for doing that. So that's the reason for bringing it to Governance and Audit Committee this evening. As you'll be aware, the Local Government and Elections Act introduced some new performance duties for local authorities back in 2021. And as part of that, there's now a requirement once in every electoral cycle to undertake a panel performance assessment. That's set out within paragraph 1.4 of the report in terms of what the PPA is and importantly what it isn't. So it's supplementary to the work that we do every year on our annual self-assessment, and it's to determine the extent to which we're meeting the performance requirements which are set out within the legislation. Importantly, it's not about checklists, it's not a form of inspection, and it isn't an audit. It's about supporting our improvement work. We took a report, Chair, through all of the scrutiny committees as we do each year relating to our performance arrangements. In paragraph 1.6 of this report, you can see some of the comments that were made relevant to the panel performance assessment from each of the scrutiny committees. They were really helpful in guiding our preparation in terms of the involvement of elected members, consideration of political balance, how it would interface with the development of the new corporate plan, and ensuring that there was youth representation as part of the process. And as the report back in the summer last year set out, we worked with the WLGA in order to put in place the arrangements for the panel and its work to be undertaken. And then paragraph 1.11 of the Cabinet report sets out what the PPA needs to cover, and it needs to consider those performance requirements I referred to earlier, which is around ensuring we exercise our functions effectively, that we're using our resources economically, efficiently and effectively, and that our governance is effective for securing the above. In addition to that, local authorities are able to add some local areas of focus to the work of panel performance assessments, and this council suggested 3 areas, one around leadership, the second around the development of our corporate plan, and then finally around the transformation programme. So that was the work that the panel was tasked in doing. And then you can see within the key issues section of the Cabinet report an overview of the findings that were made by the panel. The panel composition is set out in paragraph 2.4. It was chaired by an independent person, Sally Loudon, former chief executive of the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities, the Scottish equivalent of the WLGA, and was also a former chief executive from a Scottish authority. We had a senior member, peer, and independent cabinet member from Pembrokeshire, Councillor Neil Pryor. As you mentioned earlier in declarations, Chair, the senior officer peer was Ellis Cooper, the chief executive from Merthyr. And then finally, we were required to have a panel from a peer member from the wider public, private and voluntary sector, and we worked to achieve Anna Randall in that position. Anna currently works as a strategic advisor for New Local, has previously been a director in local government in England. So the work of the panel was undertaken in terms of desktop work prior to the on-site assessment, which happened in November, and the overall conclusion is set out in paragraph 2.6 of the Cabinet report. The panel assessed the Vale of Glamorgan to be a good council within the current context of high service demand, operational pressures and resources. It's a values-based organisation with good internal culture and solid external relationships. There's a clear commitment to delivering on the corporate plan with a particular focus on prioritising the needs of vulnerable people. Staff are enormously proud to work for the council, and there's a strong sense of ambition for the future. The Cabinet report then provides members with a summary of some of the other findings, including strengths and areas of innovation, which is in paragraph 2.11, as well as then some local and national challenges. In terms of the specific findings, firstly, in terms of those 3 local areas of focus, leadership is judged to be effective with well-regarded and respected leaders. Paragraph 2.15 talks about the panel's findings in terms of the corporate plan, commenting that the council's been astute in the timing of the PPA to assist in the development of that draft corporate plan, and also recognising that while staff are behind the ambition in it, some express concern about the capacity to deliver it. And then a similar finding in relation to the transformation programme, again, that the council has demonstrated a strong track record of innovation and a commitment to delivering high quality services, but again, some concerns over capacity and pace of change. The panel has made 3 recommendations in relation to those local areas. First is around developing and effectively communicating a narrative that articulates a positive vision for the future as part of planning for place. The second is aligned with that and suggests that the council ought to consider how we signal and amplify its changing approach, both within the organisation and across the Vale. And then the third area of recommendation is relating to building on existing strong partnerships, so making sure that we take the time to strategically assess and review the partnership landscape, ensuring we get the brilliant basics right, and also look at building further innovation in terms of our collaborative working relationships with other councils. Paragraph 2.18, Chair, sets out the findings relating to the 3 performance requirements, concluding overall that functions are being exercised effectively and that within the current high levels of service demand and financial pressures, the Council is using its resources effectively and efficiently. And finally, in terms of governance, the Council has effective governance arrangements in place, but there are areas which could be further developed. And that then links, Chair, to the final area of recommendation, which is made by the panel, which is described in paragraph 220, in terms of governance and use of resources. And there's a variety of different aspects to this in terms of reviewing and revising the cycle of formal democratic meetings, reviewing the balance between the internal corporate demands placed on elected members in terms of that and their role as representatives of constituents, making sure that strong local politics is used as a force for good, and enhancing the effectiveness of scrutiny arrangements. So that summarises, Chair, what is contained in the panel's report, which you can find in full in Appendix A, and I'll hand over to Rob, if I can do, to outline the Council's proposed response.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So if I take members through what we're planning in response to those 4 areas of recommendations. Recommendation 1, planning for place. So this is about how we develop our corporate plan so that it just doesn't only speak internally to the organisation of the council, but also reflects the Vale as a place. Corporate plan is in the process of being finalised. We specifically asked this question of the panel because of the timing of the assessment, but also the timing of work on our corporate plan. So we thought it was an opportune moment to ask that question. We have made some changes to the corporate plan as drafted, and that corporate plan will be coming back to Cabinet and then to Council on the 10th of March. So there's a list or a summary on paragraph 2.25, which just gives you an outline of what we're looking at in that final document to give a stronger emphasis on the plan as a plan for the locality as well as the plan for the organisation. And also, during this time as well, we've been out to wider consultation on that plan as well. So any information we're getting back and views that we're getting back and opinions will be taken on board in finalising that plan and bringing it to Council on the 10th of March. That work will be taking place alongside work which we're doing to address recommendation 2, and that's around communicating the challenges that we are facing as an organisation, but also the opportunities that exist in the Vale and beyond. So that's about responding to this comment about the ambition is there, the ambition is high, but we're working and delivering services in quite a challenging environment at the moment. So we're looking at what do we do internally and externally to communicate all of that. In terms of internally, we've done a lot of work over the last 10 years or so around how we engage with our staff, engage with our partners, both within the organisation and beyond. We've done a lot of work in terms of narratives around the transformation agenda, for example, in terms of delivering services differently. So it really is a case of ramping that up and re-emphasising that approach. And there are some examples of that set out in paragraph 2.30. In terms of externally, we do need to get a wider message around the work of the organisation, how decisions we are taking impact on people, how we are actually taking those decisions. So there's a complementary area of activity with the public participation work that every council has to undertake, and we have to undertake a public participation strategy. So that'll be taken forward in conjunction with the corporate plan as well, in addition to looking at how we streamline some of the reports that we're writing in terms of making them more accessible to a wide range of audiences. Recommendation 3 is around building on existing strong partnerships. It was really pleasing to have the feedback that we have been undertaking a lot of work across different partnerships, and some good examples that were feeding out of the assessment report. The reshaping programme, which is our transformation agenda, sets out specific examples of partnership working, particular areas strengthening communities theme, around what are we doing with our communities in terms of improving the environment in those communities, the improving prospects for residents that are living in those communities. And we now have a section in our corporate plan entitled Working with Others, which sets out a little bit of a charter, if you like, in terms of how we're going to be working with partners in terms of moving forward on some of our work. In terms of wider work on partnerships, we have a strategic partnerships group which we've established to, in effect, and to put it bluntly, to review all our partnerships, to find out which ones are adding value, which ones can add more value, and what we need to do to ensure that that value is recognised moving forward. And that area of work is going to be incredibly important as we move forward, because a lot of the corporate plan objectives make reference to the fact that we have to work in partnership if we're going to be able to deliver on the outcomes that we want to achieve. The final recommendation around governance is interesting, and I say that because 10 years ago, when we produced the corporate plan as it was then, we reviewed all our scrutiny arrangements. So we moved from very service-specific scrutiny committees at that time to some more thematic scrutiny committees to reflect what was in the corporate plan at that time. We didn't do that for the last corporate plan, but the time is right to do it again now, because our corporate plan, as drafted, and if approved by Council on the 10th of March, will have some very different objectives and areas of focus based around places and people. So that place agenda, those people agendas, they're going to be very important, and we have started work in terms of how we reflect that in our scrutiny arrangements going forward. We've met with chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny committee. We're meeting again tomorrow, and we've met with group leaders to discuss how that scrutiny arrangement could flex, given that we've got a new corporate plan in the making. And one of the areas that we're looking at is how do we make more space in the diary for some investigatory work, stroke task and finish work. Because as things stand at the moment, we have 5 scrutiny committees. We have a plethora of other committees. They meet regularly, and there is very little time in the calendar to do some of that more meaningful task and finish work. So it's all designed around trying to free up some time to enable that to happen. And it actually touches on the last agenda to some extent about how can we have more space to do that kind of work, the kind of work that members were referring to in the previous agenda item. So that's where we are at the moment. That is an outline to the Council's response to the PPA report. And as Tom said earlier, is coming here tonight for any comments back and any opinions on that approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Rob. Is Tom, anything further? No? Leader, did you wish to make a comment or?
Thank you, Chair. I won't add much. I think Tom and Rob have covered it comprehensively. But I think 2 things. One is it was commented on that this was a very timely report. And I think it was, for the simple reason that any challenge gives you an opportunity to reflect. And I know, I mean, Rob and I were quizzed on a daily basis on top of all the other discussions and conversations that were going on. Scrutiny was one area that we discussed, but another area that we discussed was how Cabinet works. And it was quite interesting because they said, you know, you've got an awful lot of meetings. And you say, well, actually, go away, have a think. Why have we got so many meetings? It's because actually Cabinet is very collaborative, very collegiate. We do not want to have delegated authority for lots of stuff. We need to make decisions in public, and we need to share those decisions. So those sorts of conversations were very, very constructive for us. And I really welcome having people from across the UK, people that we didn't exactly know. Well, we didn't know them, but we got to know them very well over the week. And there is an awful lot here for us to look at. But I think the outcomes were brilliant. At the beginning, they talked to each of us about, well, what was it we wanted to get out of it? And I said to them, you know, we've got a hugely ambitious agenda. The corporate plan, we used to say, is it brave or stupid? We felt it was brave. We felt it was the right level of bravery because we wanted to go broader. Lots of people talk to us about things that actually are outside our remit. Well, why can't we help to affect change in those areas? And I said, you know, I think this is the right way, but what I want to know is, have we got the right culture in the organisation in order to take that forward? Because quite often when you've got that level of change, it will stop in the middle somewhere. The message won't get right the way through the organisation. And what was really brilliant from my perspective was when they came back and they said that the culture went right through. Whoever they talked to understood what we were doing and why we were doing it. And that whole area of being a values-based organisation, that we don't have to work totally on procedures, that our values will help people to understand what our guiding principles are and what we're trying to achieve. So I can't wait to get started on this. We just need to get through full council on the 10th of March. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Before I invite any questions, can I just say, obviously, it's a really good report. There are areas of improvement, as there would be in any organisation if we went into. But I think, you know, certainly from this committee's perspective, and we'll wait to see what's said, just like to thank you and your teams, really, for delivering a really good outcome for this panel assessment. It came from the heart, I think. It was set up because people were told what to say. I think it demonstrates your values as an organisation and the culture to some respects in the organisation. So if you could convey our thanks to certainly the staff and the elected representatives, because obviously you'll wait and see what happens in your council meeting. But it's a really good report, and as you say, Leader, very welcome, very timely for the organisation. Questions, Councillor Goodjohn.
Thanks. And if I can start with a quick comment, of course, it is a fantastic result for the organisation, and congratulations on that to all of you. I think there is a big but in there, though, which I'm sorry we do have to focus on, because overall it is a fantastic report, but there is a but, which is that this is in the context of the fact that the authority has faced, mitigated by Welsh Government, 15 years of austerity before now, and therefore the level of resource and the capacity of local government across Wales is really stunted because of that. And it is within this context that the organisation has done really well. What's difficult is that as an organisation, we generally, I think, have done overall very well. And that's what this report is setting out. But the difficulty is we're not a lone organisation. We are a public body. And that means that we have very large stakeholders from the public, which don't see things in exactly the same way as we do. And I think that's a really important point of saying there is signalling change and planning for places to quite separate recommendations in there. And I'd be interested as to your thoughts in this and the difference between communicating with the public and within the organisation and with our stakeholders that this change is happening, because generally we have been signalling to the public for, I'm going to say roughly 10 years or so. I haven't been here the entire time, but as a member, but we've been telling members of the public, if it's not within our remit, we're going to have to pull back from it more and more and more, whether that be community asset transfer or lots of voluntary services that we help provide, grants that we provide. We're going to have to move towards a cost-neutral approach when it comes to if it's not statutory services. So signalling that we're kind of having a switch in approach back towards our view as a public body, that we're not having to quite save as much on every single essential item, that we're able to provide a little bit more for the community or on a free basis, on a cost negative basis for us as an organisation, because it's beneficial for the community. I'm quite interested in your thoughts on how we signal that changes in the public. Of course, whoever wants to take that.
Leader first, or? Yeah.
I'll make a couple of comments. I think that's the tricky balance, isn't it? That we haven't got any more money, and life continues to be very difficult. It's very difficult to convey one message and see something totally different being reflected back to you from social media. So that is a challenge for us. But I think one thing I can say, and there are examples of it already, one of the big ones is if you look at the Life in the Vale survey, and the top one was access to good quality care and healthcare. Well, health is not our remit, but we are working to develop a new clinic next door to this office to replace a semi-derelict clinic there. We will do it as part of a housing development in partnership with the Health Board. We are having conversations about a health facility in Llantwit Major because we know that the local community wants that, and we're looking to see what we can do within our resources to support that. That's the way that we're framing it. It's not to say we're suddenly going to take over everyone else's remit. And if I also mention that I have harassed Transport for Wales on a monthly basis for the last couple of years. So, you know, if something matters to our residents, then we will see whether or not we can make a difference in that. Thank you, Chair.
Rob?
Yeah, it's a really good point and a very good question. And I think if you think about the signalling change point in the report, and then you look at the issue around the narrative around the corporate plan is not just for the council, it's for the place that is the Vale of Glamorgan. That's quite a hard sell when you've got budgets being cut every year and have been for the last, 10, 15 years. Interestingly, this year's budget consultation, we've had a far higher response rate than we ever have. We've made it quite clear that a lot of our money goes to support our schools and our vulnerable residents. And at the moment, the public opinion is coming back on that is, as a rule, supportive. And there's an understanding out there. Now, not everyone will understand this, but there is an understanding out there that some areas of our services we have to raise a charge for. And that's accepted because of the circumstances in which we're working. Things like social care is a statutory service. You'll know yourself it's a really high risk area of work. Get it wrong at your peril. So we absolutely have to fund those areas, not just because the legislation tells us to do it, but it's actually the right thing to do because there are individuals in our community that need our support. And if it wasn't for us, there'd be no one else to offer that support. So it's only right that we have, in my opinion, that we have a corporate plan that reflects that. And our budget allocation reflects it as well as a consequence. That means that some other well-loved services have to either be cut back or we have to find different ways of delivering them. Now, that can mean delivering them with community groups. We do a lot of work with volunteer groups across the Vale. A lot of man hours are spent every season in our parks by volunteers, for example. We do a lot of work with town and community councils, and that's increasing. Community asset transfer is what you alluded to earlier. We're likely to see more of that. The reality is it's because we have to, but often that can lead to better results as well. So the community libraries is a really good example where, we decided at the last phase of our transformation agenda that we couldn't afford to run our libraries in our villages anymore. So those libraries are now, none of them closed. They're all being run by volunteer groups. Those buildings were transferred, and those groups are accessing far more grants and have far more opportunities to access different sources of money than if we were to have run them ourselves. And dare I say it, they're being run in a better way as a consequence of that. So these decisions are difficult decisions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're reducing the services that we're delivering. It means that those services can survive, but they're being delivered in a different way. And that's the point we have to get across, that we can't do this work alone anymore. And neither should we, if I'm honest, because often by delivering these services in a different way, they're delivered in a better way.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Good-John, and then I've got Councillor Hooper. I know you're waiting, but Councillor Good-John first.
Of course, thank you. I just wanted to have a little bit deeper dive on this point, because I think it's absolutely crucial to the whole PPA and to the whole corporate plan, which is a shame that we don't have the whole thing in front of us. But any member of this committee who isn't in scrutiny should definitely give it a read, because it exemplifies everything that's being put out here about moving towards being a county-wide approach rather than focusing on the organisation as the Vale Council, which has been a key feature of the past few years. I think it's really interesting, your points about working into collaboration, which we mention all of the time in this council, in every scrutiny, how important our collaboration work with our partners, whether it be through the PSB or voluntary groups or town and community councils, is to what we deliver and what we do. But I think on top of that, you have to acknowledge that the diminishing resources means that we have also been taking a step back. And whenever there has been the possibility, the threat of closure of a community asset or a community resource, sometimes the way we put across what we're doing, even though it's extremely tactical and purposeful in the way that we're doing it as to minimise the harm to members of the public, has been poorly communicated at times. And the way that members of the public quite rightly see it, because of the little information that they get through the democratic process, means that it suddenly comes up that, you know, X community facility might be closing. This is an emergency, we need to save it now. And it does get saved because we never had the intention of completely, you know, dropping the local community. Our intention was to try and gather volunteers, to gather community support for a new project and a new way of delivering the service. So I'm quite interested as to how in future we're going to learn from that. We're going to learn from the past few years and many different examples that I could give that you're fully aware of examples of where we've tried to find alternative funding sources for community projects and community buildings and improve the communication of how we're talking to residents in the Vale, that we're thinking about this from a county-wide perspective. We're not just thinking about how to balance our budget. Of course, that's part of it. That's always going to be part of it. But how we're trying to champion the Vale, not just as because we're the Vale Council, but because we are the ultimate public body that is responsible for the well-being and all of the well-being objectives that we set out and for the county as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. When I speak to colleagues across the organisation, I often have conversations around how well, you know, in real terms, a few million down every year from what we were the year before, and how we've got to make X £million savings. It's sometimes useful to turn that on its head, because we've got a lot more that we still have where we can do a lot of good with. So that's the conversation that we have with our colleagues internally. And we probably need to use some of the examples we've been doing internally over the last 10 years or so and start thinking about how can we use the same kind of approaches locally with our residents. So, you know, placemaking is a really good example where we are looking at the moment at placemaking in our 4 main towns. They very much are community conversations. So it's not in the old-fashioned way where you present something that you want to do to a community and then you go ahead and do it. This is about a conversation that starts before there are even any ideas. Just get a view for what the community want to see in its town. A lot of discussion, a lot of conversation before ideas are even brought to the table. And that's really important because it's a difference between engagement and consultation. So we need to do a lot more of that, and that's recognised, and that work is happening. Probably if pushed, I'd say that work is happening in pockets across the organisation, so we need to make it work to a greater extent. And it's that kind of approach we then need to continue to explain the challenges that we're facing because of the budget situation and because of the demands upon us. So if your budgets are reducing and the demands are increasing, something's got to give. And what can't give are those essentials of life, things like education, things like social care. If we were to divest from social care, I'd be in a spot of bother, but the health service would be in even more of a bother than it is at the moment. So we've got to look at the bigger picture here as well. And if you look at our approach to housing and homelessness, you know, we've been accommodating a lot of our homeless clients in hotel accommodation. That's costing us a fortune. It's not very dignified. So we've made the decision this year that has to stop. And it is going to stop because we've been able to rehouse our homeless clients in temporary accommodation, in step-up accommodation away from hotel spaces. So it's better value for money, and it's a better response to our housing clients as well. So all these conversations, we have to explain all this better. And often we do a lot of good work and then we're straight on to the next thing. We don't take time to reflect on what we've achieved and make the point that this has been achieved by your local council and we need to do more of that. I don't know if that helps.
Councillor Hooper, apologies for keeping you so long.
That's all right. I won't go anywhere. 3 points, Chair, if I may, and some of these do overlap with some of the comments Councillor Goodjohn's just made and the responses. The first one is regarding the recommendation on signalling change, and I think there's a link to the report we're taking next that talks from Audit Wales that references that there's a difficulty with local authorities being able to plan adequately for their medium-term and longer-term future. And it strikes me that this fits into the conversation. We've had a very historic conversation of where we've got to, but the future looks as difficult to plan for as well. So I think that's something that I'd really be interested in the response from whoever feels I respond. And the second point is just a word of caution, I suppose, in recommendation 4, reviewing and revising the cycle of democratic scrutiny meetings. I don't know whether I'm alone in thinking this, but I think scrutiny in this council is oftentimes too poor. We don't have enough people who work and read papers, who engage in the meetings and ask questions. And I think we've got to find out what the reason for that is, rather than just changing what meetings are and what places. So I would hope that the officers and cabinet would engage positively with opposition parties in that regard. And the last point I wasn't going to bring up until I heard it speaking. I think I just want to make the point that when we're talking about local communities taking over assets, when people volunteer, volunteering is something that people can do when they've got the time and capacity to do it. So it tends to be people who are more often than not, research has shown that's more often than not, who are middle class, who've got skills to be able to do it. And it often further excludes people who actually we could help to build up in our communities to be part of it. So I think we need to be really careful that just suggesting that the council leaving things and others taking them over, then they're better. It still misses a huge proportion of the people in the Vale of Glamorgan who I think could benefit from supporting some of those organisations, but either don't have the means, the time, the bandwidth, whatever it is, to do so. So I just want to put an air of caution on those last few points that were made. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hooper. Rob?
Yeah, the first point, I think, if I understood it correctly, was around planning, corporate planning for the 5-year cycle. difficult in the context of the financial situation and potentially the next few years' financial situation as well. Absolutely. I don't disagree with that. I think, well, I know that the corporate plan is ambitious. It's ambitious in that context as well, in particular. But I think from my perspective, we can be an organisation that's ambitious, or we can write a corporate plan. You know what? It's really easy to deliver. What's the point in that, if I'm honest? You know, I would far rather have an ambitious plan, something that stretches us, and something that recognises some of the points that Councillor Hooper has raised in terms of some of our communities and the needs of those communities. We can't ignore that, because if we ignore that, we failed. So I'm really proud of the fact that the strengthening communities theme and the theme around people and supporting, giving people the best start in life and supporting people who are vulnerable is in there, front and centre of that plan. It's the first time we've written a plan which has a specific cohort of the population mentioned in one of our objectives, and that's young people. And that's really important in terms of giving young people a good start in life. And it makes no bones about the fact that as an organisation, we have to spend time and resources supporting vulnerable people as well. So that's an ambitious approach, and it's an approach that we need, despite the funding challenges. The second point, scrutiny, yeah. Really good point. And I think in terms of looking at the arrangements for scrutiny in the future, it's not about how many scrutiny committees or how often should they meet. Or it's not just about that. It's about the purpose of scrutiny as well, and the quality of scrutiny. And I think there are a lot of scrutiny committee meetings where reports are sent for noting, for information. There's not really much discussion. There's quite a considerable weight of paperwork. Somehow we must free up some time to have that more in-depth, specific investigatory task and finish work around some of the things that matter, and some of those objectives in the corporate plan, for example. And the solution could well be that after each AGM, members of each scrutiny get together and think of their work programme for the year ahead, how many task and finish pieces of work they want to do. And I don't mean task and finish work that carries on for a whole year, perhaps an 8 to 12 week window where you have a focused piece of work, where you target a specific area, and that piece of work then informs policy of the council. So I'd agree that, you know, we do need to improve the scrutiny arrangements in this organisation. And probably if you asked most chief executives, most would say the same. So, yeah. And the third item was around, I think, the strengthening communities theme and the support for people, given that a lot of volunteers and a lot of organisations who tend to step up have got a lot of time on their hands and are able to do so. What about the people in society who can't? And I think I would just point you in the direction of the work we're doing in North East Barry at the moment, in terms of the time that we're spending, in terms of with the community, looking at what the specific needs are, what the specific requirements are, and how we can improve life chances of those people who are living in sort of the Pencoedrif cluster, for example. Work through some of our schools, through some of our community-focused work that we're doing, reaching out and linking in with employers. So there's a lot of work which is underway at the moment, and a lot more we could be doing, and the corporate plan is a nod to that work as well. Don't know if that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Anyone else? I've been a bit flexible here because some of them have been. Councillor Prothero. Councillor Prothero.
Can you hear me now? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I was just bringing us back to the topic of the panel performance assessments. I know this was the first time we've done this as an organisation. We've learned quite a lot from it. And there's a lot of things that we're doing as a result of the recommendations, which we've been discussing tonight, which is great. I'm just curious to know, out of the experience, if we think it's been a successful one. To me, it has, and I would congratulate Tom and his team for grasping the mettle and to coming out with a corporate plan, which most definitely is an improvement. It's most definitely clearer. Our objectives are clearer. They link with our communities. We're going to build on engagement, and that's all really positive. And also look at the scrutiny process so we can get more out of it, which I think is essential. So I just want to go back to that question of as far as the outcome goes from the panel performance assessment, are we happy with it? Would we do it again? Would we do it differently? Thank you.
I don't think it's in our gift to do it differently. It's set up through legislation, but would I do it again? Would I go early again like we have done? Because we were the third in Wales to have it done. If there's anybody else out there thinking about producing a new strategy for the next 5 years, if that's your roadmap of how you're going to get to the next 5 years, what do you want to achieve? I think it was a really good idea to have it at that time because it tests what you're doing at the right stage. There's no point asking if your corporate plan is ambitious enough when there's only a year left to run in it. So from my perspective, the idea of going now was based on wanting to open ourselves up to challenge at the right time. I'd actually do it again. You know, even if I had the choice not to, I would do it again because you're opening yourself up to external challenge. We deliberately picked or asked for a range of representatives from across Britain because they would have come with different skill sets, different experience, different outlook on things, and that was important to us as well. So yeah, would I have done it in a similar form again? Absolutely. Would we have done it at that time again? Yes, because it makes sense to ask searching questions at the right time, and giving you enough chance to adapt and to amend what you're doing in the face of that feedback. It wasn't a particularly easy process because it was pretty full on for those 5 days when they were on site, and there was a lot of work that was undertaken in advance as well. And it's only right that you have questions thrown at you and constructive challenge. But Tom was right, it's not like an inspection as such. It's designed to be far more of a conversation and a dialogue in terms of the direction of travel. So yeah, it was really worthwhile, really worthwhile. I don't know if the leader wants to add, or Tom. Tom may have a different view. I don't think he does, but he may have. Leader?
I would agree in terms of, yes, I'd do it again. I found it a really valuable exercise. But there was a point in it where I did say to one officer, why have we had 2 Eston inspections, rewritten the corporate plan, sorted out the budget, and there was something else as well, I can't remember what it was, and doing the panel assessment, all in the space of a few months. Most of us aged dramatically over a couple of months, but it was worth doing.
I think you look younger, leader. Well, that's a good job.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, I had to follow that. No, just a quick comment, I think. There has been a trade-off, of course, when it comes to focusing on the statutory services, and a little word of warning, because I really do think that after the Let's Talk survey, the PPA, public sentiment, and especially after the vote in March, if it does go through, of the corporate plan and the budget, there is a real, for lack of a better term, a mandate for some real radical change in the way that scrutiny is done and the way that we perform as a council through the corporate plan. There is a radical mandate there, and I don't want that to be lost along the way. So I think it must be recognised that capacity has been lost, not just through austerity, but also through corporate, because we've had to focus on cuts outside of schools and social services, and quite rightly too, but it means that our capacity to organise within the county has been greatly diminished, and that must be recognised. And it means that if we're going to switch, there needs to be some kind of capacity building within the next 5 years on top of everything else we're doing as far as possible to make sure that we have as far a reach as possible in our communities. Because, you know, for example, you mentioned the good work that is happening in North East Barry, absolutely, but it hasn't touched enough, you know, residents' minds. You know, they haven't seen it visibly enough yet, I would say, for it to be as effective as it really could be. The placemaking is fantastic. As participating in some of those sessions, it's fantastic, but the amount of resource that it has is seriously lacking for the kinds of goals that it's aiming to achieve. So that has to be recognised as part of any future strategies, in part of future annual delivery plans, that there needs to be capacity building within the organisation to do more as part of the whole county, as well as leveraging the fantastic resources we do have already.
Are there any other comments from any other members? No, can I just make a few comments then in regards to a few things? I was I was with Councillor Hooper in regards to hanging your hat on the Audit Wales Financial Sustainability Report, because obviously that sets the scene from an independent organisation in regards to financial sustainability in local government in Wales, and obviously it picks up all the issues that council has been raising in the past in regards to how difficult it is, and I think how difficult it will be. So I don't know whether there's any mention of that could be made in regards to it. And the other question I posed is in regards, I raised it in the last committee, is that, whilst the council may wish to be ambitious, it needs to make some bold decisions now and again about the services it provides and the services it is not ever going to deliver anymore, because clearly spreading the jam so thin isn't good for anyone. And actually, for a bold council to make a decision to say, actually, we're not going to deliver this because, and explain why you're not delivering it because we've got to support X, Y, and Z, I think is key to moving forward. And that can be a cultural shift in regards to elected members, let alone the officers, because obviously everyone wants to give everything to everyone. So that's a very difficult decision. Rob, you made the comment about young people. There's nothing in the response about young people. It may be in the corporate plan, but it was picked up obviously within the in the panel assessment that young people. It was important that young people be involved because they give a different view of the world, etc. Paragraph 835 of the panel assessment, because it says we consider including young people in partnership working is essential. So I'm just wondering whether that actually ought to be spelt out as well, and how you are actually going to engage with young people, because I know in some authorities they've got a youth mayor and they've got a youth cabinet. In other authorities, you've got youth councils. They have youth members sitting on scrutiny committees, because it gives a completely different set of dynamics, because the way lots of the young people nowadays have got different views of ways services are delivered. So whether that could be picked, I don't want to, I just raise whether that could be picked up. You also raised the issue about partnerships adding value and partnerships adding even more value. What are you going to do with partnerships that add no value whatsoever? Because again, there are lots of meetings that officers go to, and as well as I do, it's a talking shop. Nothing ever gets said, nothing gets done. And actually it adds no value whatsoever. And in reality, again, someone needs to make a bold decision to say we're not coming anymore because, it's not doing anything for the community. The issue around governance and using resources effectively, I think there needs to be a cultural shift there. you know, this isn't just about tipping up at the meeting and sitting down and saying nothing and then going home. You know, I think mention was made of not even opening papers. You know, we've all been there where people turn up with their papers and just not even open them. So I think there's a cultural shift there. And in regards to the comments, in regards to the sort of final sentence of paragraph 2.38, it says, proposal will be presented to Democratic Services Committee, Cabinet and full Council. I was just wondering why they're not coming to us, given we're the assurance. It's not mentioned within there. Who am I to disagree with the leader? But I think health, in some respects, health and well-being is certainly a responsibility of the council. And when you look at the services you provide, and I think you raised them, leisure services is a discretionary service. So actually you don't have to provide it at all. Look at the savings you'd make there, phenomenal. However, the unintended consequence of not delivering leisure services would have a huge impact on the health of the population. So I think there's an issue here that needs to be tied up. There's an issue that actually the health board and others need to recognise. It's the same with social care. You know, unless there's social care, it's okay giving targets to say we're going to get people out of hospital within 50 days, etc., etc. If there's no capacity in the social care system. You know, there wasn't any capacity beforehand. There's no capacity now, unless you've got occupational therapists, social workers, you know, if you've got a DFG or anything like that, then there does need to be that thinking at the partnership level to say, how can we all work this together? Because if it's not done, then obviously the only people who suffer are the people of the Vale, throughout Wales as well, in my view. Councillor Goodjohn, I think messaging is key, and your point, Rob, engagement and it's not consultation, it's engagement first. Let's get in there with the public. Let's get having that big discussion about, you know, what we want to do about the area, and then consult. Because actually, if you've got the views of the public through the engagement session, it normally makes it a little bit easier through the consultation. Whereas if you go out to consultation first, they all think it's being done to them. And no one will listen, no one feeds back. So I think messaging is key. And I think the key area, again, you've raised about community groups. I don't think a lot of people understand that. A lot of councillors don't understand it either, because they can draw down grants from all types of sources, which you can't as a local authority. And actually, there is a benefit sometimes to community groups taking over those activities. If I just go to the report quickly, sorry about this, I go to the report quickly. Paragraph 12.3 of the report raises this issue about the governance and that of the organisation. And it's got 3 bullet points there. Firstly, about concerns around inappropriate member behaviour impacting on public perception, adversarial nature causing individual member stress, etc. I think that, you know, the message to that really is the strengthening of the code of conduct. So it's key that, you know, in some respects, if people, if members are misbehaving or actually officers misbehaving within any forum, then it's only right and proper that, you know, they're either spoken to or they're reported. I know that's difficult sometimes, but I can, you know, I've done it. I've reported several members for inappropriate behaviour in a council meeting, and they've been dealt with accordingly. And I think once you get a culture of saying this isn't acceptable anymore, you know, if you read the Ombudsman's report, Rob, as you know, they say about senior officers having sort of skin like a rhinoceros, you should be able to take that, you know, rough and tumble of discussion. But sometimes it's not appropriate, and sometimes for junior officers it's not appropriate. And as you say, it's not appropriate for members either on occasions to, you know, be inappropriate to one another and such like. So there's a key area for me in regards to sort of member training. Again, about the meeting overload, again, you've raised the issue about the number of meetings. I'm sure you've already looked at this, and I'm not trying to tell you how to suck eggs, but, you know, a review of all your committees in some respects are required, you know, because you've got a huge number of committees in the Constitution, and actually do you require them all moving forward, which again would give you some capacity. The other thing about decision making is looking at the scheme of delegation. And I think the leader raised the question about obviously Cabinet wishing to be engaged with the public or be engaged to be seen to be doing that rather than making the decision in a, like they used to say, in a smoke-filled room in a bar, but not nowadays, you know, let's have that. But, you know, given the delegation to officers to make decisions at the appropriate level, rather than having the member involvement in some of those, dare I say, sort of trivial matters where sometimes they get involved in. The other one is about the effectiveness of debate and online meetings. I didn't know whether anyone's reviewing the online meetings and, you know, the hybrid meetings that the council has is, you know, obviously, it's not for me to say, it's for the council to decide. People know I'm not a big supporter of online meetings at all, and whether actually getting people back into the chamber and getting that debate going within a chamber environment actually would address some of that issue, because the unfortunate thing I see, and I'm sure it's something for you to look at, you know, you just turn your camera off at home and you don't know whether people are there or not. So, you know, and again, is that democracy, really? I'm sure I'll be shot after this. I think that was it. That was the only comments I wanted to make. And clearly, if you would kindly take them back, you can disregard them, you can do with them what you want. But you know, I think there are issues that, you know, if you're going to release officer time, which, as you quite rightly say, and member time, which is extremely precious, which we all know about, then, you know, you can't continue doing what you do. And in regards to scrutiny, I agree with you, Rob. I think sometimes people see a scrutiny committee as let's have a time to have a go at the lead administration. And it's not meant for that. It's meant to actually deliver improvements within service delivery within the council and to actually suggest proposals to the administration to make those improvements, and, you know, dealing with deep dives, dealing with real issues that need to be addressed rather than issues that people just want to look at. Again, I think needs to be looked at. Those are my only comments. I don't want you to come back because I'm sure we could be here all night discussing it, but I only say that with a view to assisting and nothing else. Okay, if there are no other comments then, the recommendation, Tom, is that we feed back our comments, don't we? And I'm sure Gareth will deliver something for me to feed back to Cabinet for consideration at its meeting on the 17th of February. But I will try and pick up all those issues, obviously, that the members have raised. And as I said, you know, please take them in the spirit they're meant. They're not. I'm not here as a, you know, criticising it, just as that critical friend, really. Rob,
can I just come back on one thing, just to say thank you for committee for the discussion, really useful discussion, because this stuff is important, and we'll take all these comments back and see how we can reflect it into the PPA response. A lot of this stuff is happening, as you can imagine, but some of the more detailed comments that have come out this evening have been really helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Can we just so we move that we've considered the Cabinet report and the appendices, and we make the following observations Cabinet for the 17th of February. Yeah. So move, please. Good, John. Thank you. Councillor Hooper. Is that a seconder? Thank you.
It is, but I also felt like putting my face on the camera, Gareth.
That's very kind of you. I've been missing you. I have. You know, I normally...
because if people aren't at home, they might have their camera switched. Might not be around, so I'm just making sure.
Oh, thank you. Okay, if there are no anyone, council. Oh, we got confused then. If there's no one against that, that's carried. Can I certainly thank the leader and Rob for coming along this evening. Leader, you can stay if you wish. Chief Executive, you can stay if you wish. But if you want to go home, you carry on. Oh, no, I wouldn't mind. But just thank you for your time. You know. Oh. Okay. Have you? Right, okay. That's in regards to your own report, though, isn't it? Yes, no, I know. Yeah. Okay. Next report is the, well, Tom's gone now, financial sustainability. Oh, you're going to do it, Pat, are you? Okay. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to give this a fairly brief introduction, but I think it's worth having a little bit of a recap to start with, because this was part of Audit Wales 23-24 programme of work, so we're going back a little bit now. They were addressing three things from this piece of work. Firstly, the strategies to support councils' long-term financial sustainability, councils' own understanding of their financial positions, and also councils' reporting arrangements to support regular oversight of their financial sustainability. They issued local reports in the autumn. Ours was published back in September now, and we discussed the two recommendations at our meeting shortly after that time. Audit Wales had identified, firstly, that there were some weaknesses in how the council plans its approach to financial sustainability in the medium-long term, and set out some recommendations as to what we needed to do to address that. And they also reported on the impact of the financial approach. Councils should develop reporting arrangements to provide members of the public and local communities, improved information on the impact of their decisions on those communities. Our report was largely positive, and actually, in view of both of those recommendations, we already had programmes of work underway, and primarily around the reshaping and transformation programme that reports have been put in front of the Cabinet of this council back this time last year. And we're also starting to bring more performance information into our financial reporting. And we've been having discussions in our budget planning for 25-6 as to how we could have greater transparency with the quality impact assessments. And members will have seen from the consultation website this year that we're actually in a position where we'd published quality impact assessments for every savings proposal in the budget. So that's been quite a step up in performance, and a really welcome one, I think. Ideally, we'd have brought the All Wales picture along at the same time, but that wasn't published until 2 or 3 months later, at the start of December. I think you'll agree, and it's caused some difficulties them coming separately, but I think if we'd waited 2-3 months longer, that first report wouldn't have come to you in a particularly timely fashion. I think the main one of the issues we had, and this was an issue that was flagged up by other treasurers across Wales when the local reports were received, was the lack of context that was provided at the front of those reports. And it was a positive thing to see in the All Wales report that had been addressed. And I'll pull out a couple of the points that it raised, and they are in the body of the report. There are significant risks to sustainability of local government finances, which we all know across the medium term, without actions to mitigate them. But those are actions for councils and government alike. The public sector, and this was missing in the local reports, has faced a period of really unprecedented financial pressure, and we've talked about that earlier this evening as well. Not surprisingly, those pressures have impacted different councils and services differently, but broadly very, very similarly. And there have been more recently, certainly, significant impacts affecting councils' financial sustainability, and just a couple of those, high inflation and demand, they've had a dramatic impact on us. All Wales then, councils, the headlines from the report were very similar to ours. Most councils had a really good understanding of their longer term financial pressures, were on top of the short term financial pressures, but didn't necessarily have plans in place to fill those gaps in the future years, which is very much at the forefront of our reshaping and transformation programme. Many of the financial pressures are in Wales are actually common to the rest of the UK, and that's certainly been a case with those English authorities in particular, less protected than Welsh during the periods of austerity. We did have some concerns around national issues as well, around that make financial planning more difficult, and certainly the absence of multi-year settlements has been a real barrier to really good financial planning. And it's been good to see in the Chancellor's budget announcement in October and the subsequent one from Welsh Government that there is the real prospect of a spending review late spring, summer, and multi-year settlements to follow. So this evening we're just asking you to consider the All Wales report and for comments to go onto Cabinet, along with those that are in the agenda papers from Corporate Resources when they had a look at this paper back in the middle of last month. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and obviously thank you for bringing this report. Committee's obviously commented upon the Vale Glamorgan specific report, and the comments have been forwarded to Cabinet for that. In regards to this very specific report, are there any questions? No? Any comments? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to almost repeat the line that Matt just referenced, that this is a job for governments as well as councils to sort out the longer term. And I think it's pretty salutary that in the report they said that although no Welsh councils have declared effective bankruptcy, they could foresee chances that some could. And I think this is something that the wider public probably don't understand yet, just how precarious medium-term financial planning is for councils. And it is the responsibility of primarily central government, because Welsh government have deal with a block grant as well. So this is about central government making sure the resources are in the places that are needed. Otherwise, we'll just end up in a declinist, miserablest state, which is the danger. Thank you.
Any other comments? No, I think obviously we've picked up the points under the Vale report specifically, but I think the key ones are, as you said, Matt, the longer term settlements would be an advantage. I don't know what they're indicating, whether that's 2-3 years or whatever, but for a council to plan, its medium-term plan is based on sort of a 5-year plan. And if we're looking at future generations, I can always remember when we were asked to plan for 25 and 50 years hence. So how you do that without knowing what you're going to be, what funding there's going to be, it's very difficult. In regards to the, one of the things I looked at was the usable reserves, so not the earmarked reserves of councils, which is quite staggering, really, when you look at it. And you say about the Section 114, if I was predicting something, I'm sure Monmouthshire would be the first one to go under, because it's only got £19 million worth of usable reserves left as at 23-24, and that went down from 27 million the year before. Obviously, the veil is reduced, but it's hopefully in reasonable stead. But one thing I just get concerned about is people like, again, Rhondda and Taff, their reserves are £215 million. You know, it's bigger than Cardiff, bigger than Swansea and everything else like that. And there are councils like yourselves who are not even, you know, who can't provide sometimes the basic services when it comes to social services, education, etc. And we've got council holding huge sums of usable reserves, not earmarked reserves, moving forward. And I think there needs to be some sort of parity there around, you know, when they do a settlement to say actually some of the big authorities need to be using some of their reserves to balance their accounts. I think the Auditor General tells us all what we already know. There's nothing with rocket science within there in some respects, in my view. I think, again, the government needs, apart from government giving funding, the government also needs to be made aware that when it passes new legislation, you know, it normally doesn't come with any funding whatsoever and expects local government to pick up the tab again, so adding additional burdens on the local authority. So I think all we need to do is just reiterate that at some stage to say, look, you know, thank you for telling us exactly what we know, but it's not a difficult, we're in a very difficult place. Settlements were reasonable this year, but you still need to make efficiency savings. You don't know what's going to be next year. Who's going to say what happens in 2027? So thank you for bringing the report, and clearly we note it, and obviously comments will be made to Cabinet in due course. Leaders off. Rob? Okay, next item is the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy 25-26, update for 24-25. Come on, Gemma, you've been waiting.
Good evening. Thank you very much. And thank you ever so much to members who were able to come to the Treasury Management training earlier this evening as well. So this report's trying to do a huge number of things in one report, all Treasury related. So it gives us a kind of monitoring position for borrowing and investments for the period to the 31st of December. It sets statutory and local prudential and treasury management indicators for updated for 24-25. So I've been promising all year to bring updated 24-25 prudential indicators for IFRS 16 implementation. So it revises them for that. It also revises the treasury management indicator for the maturity split based on the breach that was reported as part of the last monitoring. And then it sets treasury management and prudential indicators for 25-26 and beyond. Now, they're based on the draft capital proposals that have been updated slightly for some assumptions around some additional funding we're expecting as part of the final proposals. Of course, we haven't got the final proposals or the final settlement, so it's possible that we may need to change the Treasury Management Strategy dependent on what comes forward towards the end of the week. We're also asking, this report also sets out the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy, which is set out in Appendix 2. And it sets out the minimum revenue provision, so for 25-26, but also updates the 24-25 minimum revenue provision based on the report that came to Governance and Audit Committee recently with those amended proposals. And then finally, it sets out the Treasury Management Policy Statement, which is in Appendix 3 of the report. So some very brief thoughts on IFRS 16. I promise not to drone on about it too much, but it has been a really significant undertaking for finance this year. We still have some known unknowns within IFRS 16. So peppercorn leases, obviously the right of use asset to the council for a peppercorn lease isn't the value that we're paying in terms of the lease cash flows. And so we're required to have valuations for those, and we've only had some of those valuations back. So some of the figures in the Treasury Management Strategy are very estimated. And also we've got a little bit of more work doing. So as part of this stream of work, we've had to assess all our embedded lease contracts across the council for a right of use asset. So we've come a really long way in terms of that piece of work, and we've learned a lot as part of that. And I think we're broadly in the pack across Welsh local authorities, but we still have a little bit of work to do in respect of supported accommodation in adult social services. But we hope to finalise that in the next couple of weeks. We have built a little bit of headroom in, and we will be requesting delegated authority as part of the proposals to revise the figures within the capital programme and treasury management for IFRS 16 to enable us to close the accounts this year, because it is the first time. But I do think I potentially not built enough headroom into the authorised limit for IFRS 16. So I'll be revising that for the version that comes forward for Cabinet, because I think it slightly muddies the water in terms of we clearly now say within the report that if the authorised limit is breached, we will report it to Council straight away. We've got a delegated authority to change those indicators for IFRS 16. And we know that it's likely to need to be revised. And I think it just will help everybody if I have slightly more headroom and we don't breach that authorised limit purely for IFRS 16. The interim report provides an update on the Council's Treasury Management operations to December. So all activities are in accordance with the approved strategy. And we did report a breach previously in terms of that maturity split, and we've revised that Treasury Management strategy accordingly. Obviously, this area is a really highly regulated part of accounting, and rightly so. So some of those guidance and codes that we have regard to are CITFA's Treasury Management in the Public Services Cross-Sectional Guidance Notes, CITFA's Prudential Code, the Local Government Act, and Welsh Government Guidance on Investments. In terms of the Appendix 2, it covers quite a wide range of subject matter. So we've got the reporting requirements, some of the statutory, prudential and treasury management indicators, some notes around treasury management training, some quite extensive consideration of the economic background, prospects for interest rates. There are balance sheet projections. And I think in terms of the balance sheet projections, I think we're a little bit inconsistent in terms of the periods that we consider as part of those projections. So I think that's something that we'll pick up for hopefully next year's strategy, is just being more consistent about those years of consideration. In terms of our borrowing position, total external borrowing at the 31st of December 2024 was 153.852 million. So that was at an average rate of 4.26. So we took out £20 million of additional external borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board. 80 million of that was at an average rate of 4.15% because we utilised a special rate for housing revenue account schemes, and the remaining 2 million was at 4.75%. So that was just at the standard local authority certainty rate. We've also taken out an additional 2 million of borrowing from a local authority, and that was at a rate of 4.65% for 3 years. So quite a lot of borrowing when we compare with previous financial years. But probably we haven't borrowed as much as ideally we would have done if interest rates had been slightly lower. So we've had real regard to the kind of interest rates that are available and tried to keep it as low as possible. Obviously, with our reserves, based on the current projections being depleted, we will need to borrow and make up some of that lost borrowing, in effect, in next financial year. And I know prospects for reducing interest rates aren't looking particularly vibrant, but we'll keep that under review as we progress through the year. In terms of MRP, obviously we brought a report recently around reviewing the policy set out in the 24-25 strategy. And as members will be aware, MRP is a method that we use to charge our revenue accounts over time with the cost of our capital expenditure. that was originally funded by debt. So that was back in 16th of December 2024. And that's going to require full approval at full council before it can be introduced. But the MRP policy set out in this report reflects those proposals. In terms of investment strategy, obviously our investment funds are significantly depleted, and so the range of our activity is a lot less than we've seen in previous years, and partly because we've had an eye on that, keeping that external borrowing relatively low in the context of high interest rates and not wanting to have to do planned borrowing in a kind of emergency cash flow situation. We have kept our investment balances probably even more liquid than we have in previous years, and we've always kept them relatively liquid. So predominantly we've used things like the Debt Management Office and many market funds, as well as the council's bank account to manage that liquidity. So our total investments at 31st of December were around 15.9 million, and that was at an average rate of 5.09% over the 9-month period. We are hoping and planning for higher levels of investments at year end, and some of that might be aided by some Welsh Government grant that will come through in the final quarter of the year. So in terms of Appendix 3, this sets out the Treasury Management Policy Statement, and we're required to refresh this each year. And some of the things that are included in this include specifying the roles of the officers that will be involved in Treasury management activities. And there's a very clear framework of the types of things that we need to cover as part of this appendix. The report does reference corporate performance and resources as the scrutiny committee, and this was picked up, I think, in Adam's training. And obviously we need to review that because our current approach is that we bring the monitoring to Governance and Audit Committee. So I'll be proposing to amend that for the Cabinet report, and building on some of the points that were picked up at previous committee, we are trying to make in the strategy it clearer that if there's a breach for the Treasury management indicators, in the main that would be reported as part of the monitoring cycle. It's only where we breach the authorised limit where we will be reporting it immediately to the next council. So those are the main points I was going to draw out on the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gemma, for that. Any questions? No? No, Councillor Cudgel?
Yeah, just a quick one. Thanks for scrutinising yourself, saving us half the work. Just quickly on external investments on the balance sheet, I was quite interested. That seemed to be doubling over the 5 years. And yet earlier on, when it came to investment balance, it didn't seem to be lining up the figures. If I can give you the exact tables, that would be probably helpful. Table 4 and... Got my notes. Apologies. And the balance sheet. I don't think it has a table number. Anyway, if you just have a quick look just to double check, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but if you could double check, that'd be helpful. Because it seemed to be staying the same earlier on.
Okay, absolutely, Councillor, happy to take that away and have a look and put it right if needed for Cabinet. I know we had lots of fun and games with those tables, so it's perfectly possible that we might need to review and amend those. Certainly, we are in some tables projecting that those investment balances will be slightly restored in future years as we're replacing some of that borrowing that should have been undertaken potentially in this financial year. But I will take that away and do a bit further review. Okay.
Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Gemma. You already addressed all my kind of boring finance questions. Almost a couple of, or maybe one request, I guess, from me. When we look at kind of projections and everything for future years, do you then track how accurate those projections were through variance analysis or things like that? And is that information you have or can bring to GAC? Maybe it's a slightly selfish request, so we can kind of get an easier picture with the comments of the previous agenda item, and I'll roll in this ringing in my ears, if possible.
I think that would be really interesting analysis to do. I know that we definitely get our projection of reserve levels wrong, and we do build in into the treasury management strategy. So if you attempted to marry up the reserves in the treasury management strategy with some of the reports, you would find that there's a difference. And part of that is to account for some of the lag we can get sometimes on delivery of capital schemes, and some of the lag we also get on people using up their reserves, and some of that's around kind of last minute Welsh Government grant, for instance. So we do have an adjustment of around 10 million that accounts for some of that optimism bias, maybe, in terms of delivery of schemes. And certainly I know in recent years we perhaps planned to borrow a lot more than we tended to borrow in the end. But yes, certainly we can look at how we do that in future years.
Thanks, Gemma. Any other questions? Any comments? No? If we go to the recommendations then, I just need some clarity on the recommendation, Gemma. Recommendation 1 and 2 obviously are to note. Then recommendation 3 is the Treasury Management Policy Statement. Is that going to be, do we recommend that to Cabinet for approval? And number 4, do we recommend that to Cabinet for approval? Or do we recommend it to Council for approval?
Yeah, if you could recommend that to Cabinet for approval, because that won't be changing for, yeah, that would be really helpful, thank you.
Okay, so recommendation 1 and 2 is to note. So we note the Treasury Management Interim Report for period 1st of April, 31st December. We note the revised policy for making minimum revenue provision for 24-25. And then number 3 is we note the Treasury Management Policy Statement set out in Appendix 3 and recommend Cabinet for approval. And number 4 is we note the proposed 25-26 Treasury Management Investment Strategy, including the following specific resolutions, detailed in Appendix 2, and recommend the Cabinet for approval. And then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullet points. Is that right? Yeah, good. Someone prepared to move, please? Councillor John, can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Item 8 is the progress against external regulatory recommendations and proposals for improvement. Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a really brief introduction to this regular housekeeping report that your committee have, Chair. You'll be aware in terms of the process the Council has a number of regulatory recommendations made through work done primarily by Audit Wales, but also CIW and Estin as well. When we receive those reports, the report and the management response get reported to the relevant scrutiny committee, and then those views come to your committee for consideration. Once we accept them, we put all of those recommendations into a regular tracking mechanism that goes to the Council Strategic Insight Board, and on a quarterly basis we keep an eye on progress that is being made. We bring the report to you at mid-year. We also report on this as part of quarterly performance reporting to scrutiny committees, and it all gets wrapped up at the end of the year in terms of the annual self-assessment. So we're bringing this report so you can see where things are tracking as at Q3. There are currently 60 recommendations being monitored. Of those 60, 37 of them relate to pieces of work done locally to the Vale of Glamorgan. 23 then are done from national studies. There's only one red action which is currently within the tracker that relates to a low priority piece of response to a report on WHQS. It's showing as red because it will ultimately not be done by the time that we initially said that we were going to do it. I wanted to give some members some assurance, though, that work is underway to review processes relating to how customer contact is dealt with in relation to housing repairs. It's just that that particular module of their system won't be replaced until a later date, so that's the reason for it being read. So you've got an extract of the Strategic Insight Board's tracker as part of the appendix if you want to see any of the information. But what we're doing this evening, Chair, is bringing it for information for you to note, but also asking for your views to be shared with Cabinet, and also the committee to consider the removal of 11 completed actions, which are also highlighted within the appendix, as work on those has been judged to be completed by officers. Thank you.
Any questions? No. Any comments? No, I've got a comment on, which I forgot to raise in the previous matter, or the matter previously. The Council's response to the panel review, the form recommendations, can they be incorporated on the tracker?
Absolutely, they could be, and we'll definitely give some thought to that. I should have mentioned in introducing that that item on the panel assessment that the Council's response will be tracked as and reported to your committee as well as part of the annual self-assessment report. That's a requirement of the legislation. But if committee would find it useful to have that kind of regular update as part of this this tracking, absolutely no problem in doing that at all.
Yeah, rather than can they be included? Thank you. In regards to the Welsh Housing Quality Standard, and obviously, as you said, that won't be completed by the due date. Is there a new date going to be submitted into the tracker so that we can try and ensure that that date is complied with?
Yeah, absolutely. The project to replace the NEC system is currently starting to scope the second phase of that work. My understanding is that that's due to be completed in the summer. This particular recommendation would be addressed then by phase 3. I will ask the housing team for some more information and make sure that revised date is popped in there.
Yeah, obviously, if it's if it's a system, that's one thing. But if there's work to be done and decisions to be made, then I wouldn't want that being held up by a system. Okay, and obviously I'm sure committee will agree the 11 completed actions to be removed. So we see the recommendations there, so we note the progress to date in addressing, etc. And we refer any views and recommendations to Cabinet, so if the panel recommendations could be put onto the tracker, and presumably that we agree the 11 completed actions be removed from the tracker documentation. Someone move, please. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Councillor Hooper, thank you. Seconded. Anyone against? No, thank you. Next item is progress against the internal audit risk-based plan. Number 9, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is one of the regular reports that we bring to committee, so hopefully members will be familiar with the format. And this is progress against the plan for Q3 as at 31st of December 2024. You know from previous meetings that the Internal Audit Service has set internal targets for each quarter for the plans that can be completed, and they're set out in paras 2.2. So internally, we had a target of 50% completion of the plan by the end of Q3. The summary information will be presented in the report, Chair, and the detail of the progress against plan is in Appendix A, which I'll refer to as we go through the report. As you can see in paras 2.3, we've achieved 49% of the plan as at the end of Q3, which is dead in line with the target, and an anticipated completion of the full plan by the end of the financial year will be 78% if we complete everything that's in progress as at the end of December. So we'll be there or thereabouts in terms of the 80% target for year end. Table 1 sets out the final reports and draft reports which we've issued as at the end of quarter 3. Also the number of audits which are in progress, the number of which are due to be allocated and have not been allocated at that point in time. That gives us the 49% completion of the plan. In terms of opinions that we've issued, of the 29 jobs that we've sent out in either final draft, we've issued 28 opinions, and they're set out in table 2. Really reassuring that we have a very positive numbers in terms of the opinions. 93% are positive, with 9 substantials, 17 reasonables, and only 2 limiteds. Of those 2 limiteds, Chair, they've previously been brought to the attention of committee. In particular, the tender evaluation and award follow-up, building services, project and plan teams, has actually been called into committee. Members had an opportunity to challenge the head of service. With regards to the second limited, that's in relation to the ICT business continuity follow-up audit. That's still in draft as of the end of December. So when we've received management comments and that's been finalised, a summary of why we felt that was a limited assurance will be brought to committee. Just to remind members in terms of the process with when we have limited opinions, we will bring any consecutive limited or no assurances into committee, and then committee will have the opportunity to invite in the respective head of service or director to give assurances that improvements will be made moving forward. What we've also incorporated within this report are jobs which weren't completed in 23-24, but have been incorporated in the 24-25 audit plan. They're set out in para 2.10 and table 3. As you can see, Chair, 86% of those jobs have been either sent out in final report or draft report stage, and we have 2 audits which weren't allocated at the end of quarter 3, but to reassure members, they're currently in progress. So of all the opinion work we've issued at the end of quarter 3, we've issued 88 recommendations, 5 of which have high, 36 medium and 47 low priority recommendations. The higher mediums will be covered off in the second report, which the audit team will be bringing to your attention later this evening. So in terms of appendices, Chair, Appendix A lists everything that's in the plan and gives a status in terms of where we are in terms of progress, the respective opinion and the number of recommendations issued. Appendix B, we've summarised all the information in terms of the progress against the plan, number of opinions issued and the number of recommendations made. And Appendix C highlights the 23-24 outstanding jobs which were carried forward into 24-25 plan. So progress is moving well and we're aiming to achieve the target by the year end. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions? Can I just ask where we are on the building services project and plan team services? Have they moved forward on dealing with their recommendations?
Yes, Chair, we've given them some procurement training with Ardell, and we'll be bringing that back in March, I think, when we do a follow-up. So we're on track with that. They were very receptive in terms of taking on board that training and that new knowledge, Chair.
Okay, so we'll have an update in regards to where they are on all the recommendations then in March, will we?
We should do, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any comments? No, we'll see the recommendation. The recommendation is that we note the contents of the report and progress made against the internal audit risk-based plan 24-25. Someone prepared to move, please. Councillor Goodjohn, seconded by Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 10, recommendation monitoring.
Yeah,
thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is another regular report that we bring to committee, and the purpose of this report is to provide members with a position statement on the internal audit recommendations made, implemented and overdue as at the 31st of December. Appendix A provides the detail of the high and medium priority recommendations. As you're all fully aware, recommendations are made at the conclusion of an audit review if it is felt that improvement should be made to mitigate the risk and strengthen the controls. The implementation of these are monitored to ensure the identified risks have been addressed. So Table 1 sets out the recommendation categorisation that we use, and Table 2 within the report summarises the recommendation status in respect of the audits completed from this year's plan. It illustrates that a total of 41 recommendations have been made as of the 31st of December, 24 have been implemented, and 17 have a future target date. Table 3 shows the recommendation status of audits completed prior to this financial year. The table shows that 2 recommendations made during 22-23 audits have a future date. These relate to the Local Authority Trading Company audit, and these have been brought to your attention previously, but they're still detailed at Appendix C. Table 3 also shows that there's 1 high and 2 medium priority recommendations overdue from audits completed during 23-24. 1 medium recommendation was made during the Code of Conduct audit. This overdue recommendation was reported to this committee in the previous meeting, and you did ask if the relevant officer could attend to explain the position and provide an update. Appendix B has been updated to provide detail of the recommendation and the assurance that this matter will be addressed in Q4 as it was taken to SLT recently. In addition, the 1 high and 1 medium recommendation was from an Uscala Dairy St Cyrie's building compliance follow-up audit, and this is overdue. An update on these is at Appendix B, and confirmation of a revised implementation date is being sought from the service area. As you're aware, we do continue to monitor these recommendations, and we do escalate anything to chief officers and senior leadership team on a regular basis. Thank you. I think Tracy Dickinson may be here as well, as you've requested to.
Thank you, Joan. Tracy, if you are online, we welcome your involvement, and I apologise for keeping you waiting for 2 hours 35 minutes. So obviously, committee was just a bit concerned that the sort of date in regards to this recommendation had sort of drifted with the last agreed date we had on our plan was the 30th of August 2024. So I hope that you were made aware of that. So we just welcome, an indication where you are and whether the matter has been addressed or when is it going to be addressed.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? And
Yes, we can. Thank you.
yeah, okay, no problem. If it's okay, Gareth, what I just intended to do is just run you through a couple of the actions that we have done since the audit report and just let you know where we are currently with it. So the recommendations of the Code of Conduct were made back in 2023, and back then we actually revised the Code of Conduct policy, and that went to Cabinet in January of 2024. Prior to that revision, we sent an email out to all chief officers in the November of 2023, just to remind them of their duties in relation to the Code of Conduct and their duties in relation to their staff members. And that's all staff members, both staff members that had access to IDEV or to our StaffNet, but also to staff members who don't have access currently to our IDEV learning platform or to StaffNet. We followed that. Obviously, the report went to Cabinet in the January of 2024, and in the February of 2024, we sent a further email out to all our chief officers to inform them of that Cabinet report, and also to inform them that we would be undertaking a personal details review in the March of 2024, and within that personal details review, we would be sending the Code of Conduct policy across to all staff members. That included staff members that don't have access to StaffNet via utilisation of personal email addresses that we had within our payroll system. That personal information update had a link to the Code of Conduct policy and had some key communication information around the Code of Conduct and the importance of the Code of Conduct policy. We also then went on to publish that on StaffNet Plus. So StaffNet Plus is a kind of app portal. I'll describe it as an app. Apologies if my technology is wrong, but it's the ability for all of our staff members, whether they've got email access in work or not, to access StaffNet Plus on a mobile device. And the code of conduct with the link was uploaded as part of our communication onto StaffNet Plus. So all staff that did not have access to the learning platform or to email internally within work could access the code of conduct via that. And as I said, at the same time, it was emailed out to all of our employees via personal email addresses. There may have been a couple of staff members who did not have personal email addresses that were held on that system, but the hope was that that information will have also been cascaded via the chief officers and via their line managers, and as I said, was also put on StaffNet Plus. The one element that I haven't been able to address via the audit currently is demonstrating that all staff members have read that document, and the option that we've got available to us that we are looking to roll out over the next couple of months is the same that we're doing for safeguarding in terms of training, which is asking all heads of service to get their teams to sign a document to say that they have read the code of conduct policy and that that code of conduct policy has been understood. And then we'll use the QR code for line managers to be able to upload that information that we can record on our iDev system. But as I say, that's an additional catch-all to what we've already done as part of the Code of Conduct audit report that we have. So hopefully that provides this committee with the assurance that we do take these audits seriously, that we have addressed a number of actions from the audit and in relation to this specific recommendation since November 2023. And the outstanding element of it, which is why I'm stating it's partially updated, is I've not been in a position yet to demonstrate that all of our staff have read that and that can be documented as such. Just a further reassurance to put, it is also referenced in all of our contracts that go out to all staff members, so the Code of Conduct is referenced on that. That's staff that have access or don't have access, and that's been the case for quite a number of years. But again, we can't demonstrate that somebody may have gone on and reviewed or looked at that policy. So Gareth, I hope that gives a bit more information around what we have done across the last year and a half to provide some reassurance, and we'll be taking the next step within the next couple of months.
No, I think, thank you for that, Tracy, and for that information. There is a question a minute from Councillor Hooper.
It's more a comment. I just want to thank Tracy for that comprehensive response. I think that if anyone else comes to this committee needing to talk about how they're getting on with their audit recommendations, they want to look back at this video and say that's how to do it really comprehensive. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hooper, for that. I was going to say, you know, obviously, Tracy, it's like pinning jelly to the wall, really, isn't it? You know, trying to get everyone to sign up and to agree. I think, given the comments that, you know, given all the good work that you've done, and SLT have picked this up as an issue, and they'll address it presumably this quarter, which is quarter 4. You know, all I'd ask is if colleagues from audit can have a little look again. You know, if you could give a date in regards to when you're going to get the heads of service or the directors to sign in blood to say everyone's signed up, you know, that would be marvellous. And then at least we can dispense with this recommendation, really. So, yeah, thank you very much for all your hard work. And any idea what the target date is now, Tracy?
I'd like to get it done in quarter 4, Gareth, if I'm honest, but the hope is it would be completed at least the midpoint of April, if that's okay.
Can we put the end of April then?
Yeah, happy to do that.
That's lovely, and I think I'll just get colleagues then to have a chat with you or do whatever they need to do and check that's been signed off. So, yeah, thank you very much for Tracy, and certainly thank you for staying the distance. My apologies for keeping you so long. I think the issue in regard to Ysgol Derry and is it St Cyrus, I think that needs to come to us next time. I'm just a little bit concerned that the recommendations there is that the school said they've sent whatever they need to say. Oh, draft documents produced by both Ysgol Derry and St Cyrus School has been sent to the local authority in February 2024. There's been no response whatsoever. And again, local authority formal agreement is currently under development and will be issued to both schools for consideration prior to May half term 24. We're now a year on. And obviously, the second recommendation then is linked to the first one. So they can't do the second one without the first one. So is it possible that we get the operational manager, strategy and resources? I don't want the head teacher here because obviously the head teacher is just going to point the finger at the local authority. And if that's correct, can we get the, is that operational manager in education? Yeah. Can we ask the operational manager, strategy and resources to attend the next committee, please, to explain why they've not dealt with it in 12 months? Okay, any other comments? We'll see the recommendation then. The recommendation is, oh, if I can find it now. Again, that is it? No, it's a different one, isn't it? Too many sheets of paper here. I got A3s as well. So the recommendation again is note the position statement on the internal audit recommendations made, implemented outstanding as at the 30th of December. And we considered the information provided in respect of the status of the high, medium priority recommendations made by the Regional Internal Audit Service. So recommendation 2 is we thank the Operational Manager, Human Resources, for attending and give an update. And recommendation 3 is that we request that the operational, no, we don't request, that the Operational Manager, whatever they are, the Operational Manager, Strategy and Resources attend the next committee in March 25. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor. John, can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much. And the next item is item 11, which is the Forward Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is another standard report that you're used to seeing. And as you know, the Forward Work Programme enables the committee to ensure it's covering its range of responsibilities as per the terms of reference. So the proposed agenda for the next meeting, which is scheduled for the 24th of March, is within the covering report. But in addition, at Appendix B is the draft Governance and Audit Committee Forward Work Programme for 25-26. Obviously, that may be subject to change, but it's a starter for yourselves to consider. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Joan. Obviously, add the operational manager strategy or whatever from education, if you can. And Andrew, I was going to suggest the Global Internal Audit Standards presentation, which you're making. Would it be more convenient to do it before committee, say at 4 o'clock?
That's entirely up to you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely.
I suggest that presentation in reality should come before committee rather than have it as an item report. That actually gives you more time as well and more times for questions. So if we take that off the agenda and put it at 4, is that okay, Gareth? Can you facilitate that in the chamber?
That's no problem.
Lovely.
In the chamber?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor John.
So just to say very quickly, yeah, on principle, absolutely. But with City Deal, it needs to be in the public realm, really. Just to double check that's not setting a precedent for that. For most presentations, we do it before. But for things like City Deal, yeah, we should do it in the public realm.
I don't. This is Andrew updating us on the global internal audit standards, which I'm sure you're fully aware of, but some of us aren't. No, I agree with you on the transparency part. Is that okay, Andrew? 4 o'clock in the chamber on, what is it, March, aren't we?
24th of March.
24th of March, yeah, that's lovely. Okay. Recommendation, therefore, we note the Forward Work Programme and the draft timetable for 25-26. And we endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting, removing the global internal audit standards and including the Escola Derry St Cyrus matter. Someone prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor John. Anyone second it? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? Nope, thank you. Item 12 then is there are no other items deemed urgent, where there are no part 2 reports. Can I firstly thank you for staying a distance? That's a long committee tonight. So thank everyone for staying a distance. Thank you for your contributions. And for those who are at home, have a nice cup of tea. And those who are going home, have a safe journey. I close the meeting. Thank you.